Royal Ludroth, one of the feared Leviathans of the watery realm, but how does this Leviathan hold up against other Leviathans? More specifically, how does it fare against a hunter whose weapon of choice is a greatsword? Welcome back everyone, my name is Gardwan, and in today's video we're going to showcase a tier of all Leviathan class monsters in Sunbreak through the eyes of a greatsword user. The calculated difficulty will be numerically based off the number of healing items and times healed by allies, the time to kill said monster averaged over 3 hunts, and the number of carts. The weapon, armor, item loadout, and dango eaten for each hunt will be consistent. The hunt will involve the use of Lucida, Fuel Rain, and my cat Tracy every time. Specifics of weapon build and skills will be shown at the end. No traps or ecological life can be used with the exception of a random hanging Vigor Growth Wasp. And in the event of a turf fight between monsters, I will immediately launch the opposing monster into my kill target in order to avoid skewing run times. This unfortunately was not always able to be controlled because my followers do occasionally take matters into their own hands and mount when they want. Ludroth is one of those monsters that barely qualifies as a large monster in my book. He hits like a wet fish and smells like one too. The only saving grace for showing him first in this video is the only time he will be at the top of the list. In terms of fighting overgrown sea sponges with legs, he's quite pleasant to fight as a greatsword user. He's slow, has large hitboxes, and telegraphs his moves way in advance. Subjectively speaking, he's a cakewalk compared to the other Leviathans, and gets a final score of 0 potions used, 2 palico healing, and an average clear time of 3 minutes and 43 seconds with no carts. But without further ado, let's move on to the real Leviathan, Almudron. Almudron is one of my least favorite monsters to fight due to his slippery physique that translates directly into slippery hitboxes, which translates directly into me missing my attacks over and over and over. One of the key components of playing greatsword is to be able to predict the monster's placement at any time and therein subsequent timing of charged attacks. Being able to land charged attacks as a greatsword user is paramount. Almudron is one of those monsters that falls into the category of me not being able to stick to him adequately in order to kill him easily. His movement patterns are truly unique to me, and he falls under the same level of annoyance as Gyrotodos or Leviathans. It's the firefish from Monster Hunter World. Overall, the threat of death when fighting Almudron was higher than SpongeBob, but not by much. It's his survivability that made fighting him as a greatsword user such an unenjoyable experience. Over these 3 hunts, I used 4 potions, 10 palico healings, and an average clear time of 6 minutes and 57 seconds with no carts. Now I know what some of you are thinking, why bother reviewing Almudron and Magma Almudron when clearly Magma Almudron is going to be harder, right? You may be surprised to see that's not always the case, especially with this subvariant. This dude is very similar to Almudron, but definitely hits harder. In fact, amazingly, he was my first cart in this whole experiment. Overall, he has more consistent damage and throughput throughout the fight, and that's mainly due to his burns, or I should say in part due to his burns. His moves are ramped up, he hits a lot harder, but in my opinion, he was actually easier to stick on, easier than Almudron. And besides all that, I did have faster clear times. Now this possibly could have been because I was able to hunt his base form prior, and maybe on some subconscious level I was able to predict his movement patterns better, but I test that theory later by switching the order that I fight the stronger subspecies in this video, and that didn't really hold up very well. My fastest clear time with him was 5 minutes and 45 seconds, but that was invariably tied to my follower taking upon herself to mount a Kizu, and the ran the crap out of him. But even accounting for that run, the other runs were slightly faster than his regular form. My subjective experience of fighting Magma Almudron as a GS user was much more exhilarating and a rewarding fight. Its moves like Molten Rock Explosion made the fight much more memorable, unlike Mudkip from earlier. Over 3 runs, I used 4 potions, 13 palico heals, and an average clear time of 6 minutes and 8 seconds with my first cart. Ah yes, my favorite Leviathan, Tigrex. Anyway, Violet Mizutsune is a massive pain in the butt. This water fox is the king of kiting and zoning, and for those that don't know what that means, imagine bringing a knife to a gunfight. Violet is deceptively fast and is equipped with a large arsenal of skills that are designed to push you back, knock you over, burn you around, and be an utter annoyance all around. It's continually placing hazards around the map that involve small floating bubbles, fiery puddles, and the occasional spirit bomb that most of the time I'm better off just farcasting away. Yeah, I know how to dodge it, but sometimes it's just not worth taking the risk. My subjective experience overall fighting this monster was not pleasant. It wasn't as slippery as Almudron, but was considerably more agile. My greatsword perspective on this fight is it's overall annoying. Bringing back Almudron one more time, just imagine taking his evasiveness, quadrupling it, and then allowing him to do more damage. Needless to say, Melodic carded me on 2 separate hunts, and it required a large amount of potions and off-healing from my Palico to clear each hunt successfully. Over these 3 hunts, I used a whopping 28 potions, 45 Palico heals, and had an average clear time of 14 minutes and 44 seconds with 2 carts. I must say, going from Melodic to Phoebus is a great transition. Base Mizutsune, as elegant and as shiny as they are, was not a great match for my sword. Its body movement and patterns were very similar to its Violet upgrade, but he moved at a slower pace. His Hydro Pumps either missed completely, or if it managed to hit me, it wasn't fatal, and he lacked a lot of the zoning and hazards that its Violet counterpart had. Overall, from a GS perspective, he is slightly less pleasant to fight than Royal Ludroth, but he is overall still very unimpressive. Over these 3 hunts, I used 5 potions, 10 Palico heals, and had an average clear time of 7 minutes and 55 seconds, with no carts. I want to stop just for a second and hone in on that 7 minutes and 55 seconds. It took a little bit longer to kill him because it took a little bit longer to actually reach him. His location in the map was like underground and harder for me to find a couple times, so that's a little inflated, and you'll see that comes in later in his ranking, but I kept it for consistency's sake. But these last 2, I switched back and forth between the hunts just to add in some more randomization. The Somnacanths are actually my favorite looking Leviathans, and I thoroughly enjoy their siren theme and their sleeping and freezing moves embedded in their lore. Somnacanth is pretty cute with their floating rock-like otter move where they bang the rocks together like ZZ Yaku. The incessant sleep is annoying, but it could have easily been alleviated with some sleep gems or some items if I had chosen to use them. Over these 3 hunts, I didn't use any potions, but I did have 3 Palico heals and an average clear time of 5 minutes and 6 seconds with no carts. Finally, we've made it to the final Leviathan, the fresh, never frozen Aurora Somnacanth. Compared with the previous 2 monsters that had subspecies variants, Almudron and Myths and the Somnacanths, I would consider this to be the most similar to each other. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to bore my viewers to death. I'm just going to point out some key differences to his predecessor and post the results for the 3 hunts. And I'm going to save some of Aurora Somnacanth footage for the results in the discussion. Aurora Somnacanth's main difference is its sleeping skills being replaced by frost skills and increased health and damage. It has almost identical, if not identical, hitboxes and slightly inflated health. I will say its damage is higher than base Somnacanth, but very manageable. Something interesting that I noted in each of the Aurora Somnacanth runs was there were rampant monster fights in each of my runs. As mentioned previously, whenever this occurs, I would jump on one, run it to the other, try to get them out of the fight, get them to stop fighting, so the data would not be skewed to faster run times. Ultimately, throughout the 3 hunts, I didn't use any potions. I had 10 Palico heals and an average clear time of 6 minutes and 24 seconds with no carts. After 21 total hunts across 7 different Leviathans, it's time to present the final results. Coming in dead last with a total point value of 3 is Royal Ludroth. Now you may wonder, how did he get 3 points? Each category you're rated from 1 to 7, 1 being the least amount. So in this case, for Ludroth, he used the least amount of potions, he used the least amount of healing, and he was cleared the fastest, so he was awarded 1 point for each category. Big surprise, I know. Following closely behind him is Somnacanth with 5 points. Aurora gave 12, Magma gave 14.78, and was neck and neck with its base form, Almudron, with 15. Mizutsune was a bit harder with 17, but really it was time skewed. I'm not really quite sure why, because it didn't feel harder, but that's how the study panned out. And unsurprisingly, Tigrex had 22.5. Yeah, he had the highest category across the board, almost the highest amount of points possible. Like I said, the data breakdown is pretty straightforward. They're ranked from 1 to 7 in each of their respective categories. And carding here, I had to do something interesting. I calculated the total possible number of carts that could occur over 3 hunts, which is 9. And then I had to normalize that value that if that value is obtained, how many points would be designated to carding, which would be 7. Therefore, each card counts for 7/9 of a point. That's why there's a little bit of non-integer values on Violet and on the Magma.
This is also the set that I use to do all these runs. It's really attack-heavy based with a little bit of survivability, but it's not tailored to specific monsters that I'm fighting. It's more of a general set that I use for in-game content as a GS user.
The study was found by the Bahiri Anomaly Research Lab and paid for by Admiral Gallius. If there's any issues with that, you take it up with him. The main self-critiques of this study are the small sample size of each run of 3. That's really not enough to get high-quality data, I understand that. But I don't know if it really would have shifted the overall point at the end. No matter what, Royal Ludroth is going to be the easiest, for sure, and Violet's going to be the hardest. In fact, one of the reasons why Almudron is technically listed harder than Magma Almudron was an abnormally quick clear time on that one Magma Almudron run, which I mentioned, the 5 minutes and 45 seconds. But that just happens, and that's part of the amazing part of Monster Hunter is you have randomness in each hunt. You have different sizes of monsters too. There were many times where I'd go in and I'd fight a very, very large monster variant, and a very small one back to back, and it would just move the clear times all over the place. Another main point was unaccounted follower and palico behavior activity. This was pretty huge. Sometimes my palico was spamming healing skills. Sometimes my followers were just playing very well. One time, all my followers started shooting out traps. I actually only saw that once. That was interesting. Mounting I'd mentioned before. I could have controlled for that by just not having them at all, and I could have done it completely solo. And that would have made the internal validity of the study stronger, but it would have weakened the external validity. At least for most players, because most people don't just play completely by themselves without any companions or followers. So I modeled it as close as I could to having hunting partners with you. There are other nitpicky criticisms that could be found. You know, one that I thought at the very end, which I don't know why I didn't think of, is I could have honed in on the actual time to clear by subtracting the amount of time it took to get to each monster, and that would have given a better approximate. But then you get into the whole issue of, well, if you took a longer route to get to the monster, you had more time to collect songbirds, and you could get a little bit stronger, and maybe that influenced it in a different way. So I left it all alone, but it could have been done even a step further to minimize the compounding effect of time variance. But the biggest one for sure is just some hunts I played well and some hunts I played poorly. Now this could be averaged out by addressing issue number 1 and just increasing the in size. You just keep doing runs until you have a very consistent view, and then you can throw out outliers. But for this sake, yes, there were some hunts that I didn't do very well, and there's some hunts that I did very, very well. That's just how the game is. Overall, I believe this study did a great job for controlling for most of the variables within a specific hunt, within a specific class, and within a specific weapon use of a great sword for Monster Hunter. I hope you enjoy this ranking of all the Leviathans in Monster Hunter Sunbreak. And if you like this content, I have other things related to Monster Hunter and other game genre that's going to show up in a second. Like and subscribe, and let me know how I did in the comments. Thank you, everyone.